What if the boy who dreamed of being a hero was never quirkless? What if buried deep within his bloodline slept a power so broken it could reshape reality itself? This is the story of Izuku Midoriya, a boy born not with weakness but with a gift, one that once belonged to America's greatest hero, Star and Stripe, armed with the power of New Order and destined to inherit One for All. This is the tale of how a legend is born, not by chance but by choice. This is What If Deku Had New Order? Welcome, Legends, to Chronos Recom. I wrote this story myself, so if you've got an idea for the next part or a brand new what if you want to see, drop it in the comments below. And if you're enjoying the ride, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap that bell so you never miss an upload. Now, let's jump straight into the story.
Chapter 1. The day everything changed. The playground was bathed in golden afternoon light, casting long shadows across the worn equipment. 7-year-old Izuku Midoriya ran with unrestrained joy, his wild green hair bouncing with each step. Behind him, Katsuki Bakugo and 2 other boys followed, their faces twisted in familiar sneers. "Hey, Deku, think you can outrun me?" Katsuki's voice carried that edge it always did, the one that made Izuku's stomach tighten despite his smile. "Maybe today I can, Kakin," Izuku called back, laughing. He didn't slow down, navigating between the swing sets and climbing frames with practiced ease. For most of his life, Izuku had believed he was quirkless. The doctor's words still echoed in his mind during quiet moments. "I'm sorry, but you should probably give up." Those words had crushed him, but something in his heart refused to accept them. Every night, he'd watch All Might videos until his eyes burned, clinging to an impossible dream. Katsuki's explosions popped behind him, small, controlled bursts that propelled the blonde boy forward. "In your dreams, you quirkless loser." Izuku's foot caught on an uneven patch of ground. He stumbled, arms windmilling as he pitched forward toward the concrete edge of the sandbox. Time seemed to slow as he braced for impact, closing his eyes and throwing his hands forward instinctively. The impact never came. Instead, Izuku felt his palms press against something solid, something that definitely wasn't there a second ago. He opened his eyes to find himself suspended, hands pressed flat against what looked like nothing at all, but it was solid beneath his touch. "What the?" he whispered, pushing himself upright. Katsuki skidded to a halt behind him, explosion sparks dying in his palms. "What did you just do?" Izuku stared at his hands in wonder. "I don't know. I just didn't want to fall." He pressed his palm forward again, concentrating, and felt resistance, as if the very air had solidified at his command. A wild, impossible thought struck him. "Kakin, I think I have a quirk." The next few moments blurred together. Izuku remembered reaching out, focusing on the patch of air in front of him, thinking clearly. "Become solid." And it did. A perfect, invisible wall formed exactly where he wanted it. Katsuki's disbelief quickly turned to something darker. "No way. No fucking way you have a quirk. You're lying." But Izuku wasn't listening anymore. His mind was racing, cataloging every sensation, every thought that had preceded the manifestation. He pressed both hands against the invisible barrier he'd created, laughing in disbelief. "I have a quirk," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "I really have a quirk." Later that evening, after demonstrating his newfound ability to his sobbing mother, Izuku sat cross-legged on his bed, hero notebooks spread around him. His mind was alight with possibilities. He'd spent years analyzing other people's quirks. Now he finally had one of his own to dissect. From what he could tell, he could impose rules on objects he touched or things within a short range. So far, he'd managed to make air solid, change the color of his bedsheet from blue to red, and make his pencil float for exactly 10 seconds before the effect wore off. There seemed to be limitations. He couldn't affect anything too large, and some rules simply didn't work, especially those that were too vague or too complex. But the potential was staggering. Izuku Midoriya knocked gently on his doorframe. "Izuku?" the doctor called back. "He wants to see you tomorrow for quirk registration." Izuku looked up, his face bright with determination. "Mom, I'm going to be a hero. I'm really going to be a hero." Inko smiled through fresh tears. "I know you will, sweetheart. I'm sorry I ever doubted you." That night, Izuku slept with his All Might action figure clutched to his chest, his dreams filled not with longing but with purpose. He would no longer chase an impossible dream. Now he would forge his own path forward. In his sleep, he whispered a single phrase that would come to define his journey: New Order. Chapter 2. The Path Forward. 8 years later, the morning sun streamed through Izuku's bedroom window, illuminating walls covered with hero posters, analytical charts, and training schedules. At 15, Izuku Midoriya was no longer the timid, uncertain boy he might have been. Years of honing his quirk, officially registered as New Order, had transformed him into someone different altogether. He stood before his mirror, green eyes focused as he extended his hand. New Order, he murmured, the phrase now a practiced mantra. The air in my palm will compress into a baseball-sized sphere. The air shimmered before coalescing into a transparent orb that hovered above his palm. With another command, he made it rotate, then dissolve back into nothing. Izuku smiled at his reflection. His body had changed. Too lean muscle built through years of dedicated training covered his once scrawny frame. He'd learned early that while New Order gave him incredible versatility, physical conditioning would determine how effectively he could use it in battle. 10 months until UA's entrance exam, he reminded himself, grabbing his notebook labeled New Order, Applications and Limitations, Volume 15. Over the years, Izuku had meticulously documented everything about his quirk. He could impose up to 2 rules on non-living matter at a time. Rules had to be specific and clearly defined. He could affect things by touch or within a 2 to 3 meter range. Rules lasted until he replaced them with new ones or until he lost consciousness. The more complex or unnatural the rule, the more mental strain it caused. Living beings could be affected, but only in limited ways and only by direct touch. His phone buzzed with a notification. A news alert about a villain attack downtown. Izuku quickly dressed in his running clothes. His morning routine wouldn't change just because there was hero activity nearby, but perhaps he could observe from a safe distance after his workout. "I'm heading out for my run, Mom," he called, grabbing an apple from the kitchen counter. Inko smiled from where she was preparing breakfast. "Be careful, Izuku. Did you pack your analysis notebook?" "Always." He patted his small waist pack, which contained his phone, a compact notebook, and a few energy bars. "I'll be back in an hour." The neighborhood was quiet as Izuku began his 5-kilometer morning run. His mind, however, was anything but quiet. He mentally rehearsed quirk combinations, scenario responses, and his refined close-quarters combat techniques. Halfway through his route, the distant sounds of commotion caught his attention. Following the noise, he found himself at the entrance to an underpass where a crowd had gathered behind a police barricade. A sludge-like villain had taken a hostage, a middle school student with ash-blonde hair who was struggling violently against the viscous mass enveloping him. With a jolt, Izuku recognized Katsuki Bakugo. They weren't friends anymore. Hadn't been since the day Izuku's quirk manifested. Katsuki's initial disbelief had morphed into bitter rivalry, especially as Izuku's control over New Order grew more impressive. But seeing him in mortal danger still sent a shock through Izuku's system. "Why aren't the heroes doing anything?" someone in the crowd muttered. Izuku assessed the situation with practiced precision. Death Arms was keeping civilians back. Kamui Woods couldn't engage because of the hostage. Backdraft was controlling fires started by Katsuki's explosions. The viscous villain seemed immune to physical attacks, and Katsuki's struggles were only making the situation worse. The villain's body is liquid, but it must have a core consciousness somewhere, Izuku thought. If I could isolate that, before he could think further, a blur of muscle and primary colors burst through the crowd. All Might had arrived, his iconic smile flashing as he readied his fist. Texas Smash. The force of the air pressure alone separated the villain from Katsuki, scattering the sludge into harmless globs that were quickly contained by the other heroes. The crowd erupted in cheers as All Might secured the villain in what looked like 2 soda bottles. Izuku watched in awe, mentally recording every detail of the rescue technique. All Might had used precise air pressure to separate the villain without harming the hostage, something Izuku realized he could potentially replicate with New Order. As the crowd dispersed and the heroes began cleanup, Izuku noticed All Might preparing to leave. On impulse, he stepped forward. "All Might, sir." The massive hero turned, his perpetual smile gleaming in the sunlight. "Young fan, what can I do for you?" Izuku stood straight, meeting the hero's gaze with determination rather than starstruck awe. "My name is Izuku Midoriya," I'm applying to UA this year, and I was wondering if you could answer a question about rescue techniques for amorphous villains. All Might seemed slightly taken aback by the practical nature of the question. Ah, a future hero. Well, the key is to. Whatever wisdom All Might was about to impart was cut short as he suddenly coughed, a plume of steam erupting around his massive form. When it cleared, a gaunt, skeletal man stood in his place, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Izuku's eyes widened, but he didn't panic or scream. Instead, his analytical mind immediately began processing this new information. "You're injured," he stated calmly, "and this is your true form." The deflated All Might sighed deeply. "Kid, you've got good eyes. And now you know a secret that could destroy society's peace if revealed." "I understand," Izuku nodded solemnly. "I won't tell anyone." All Might studied the young man before him, the serious eyes, the notebooks visible in his pack, the lean physique of someone who trained with purpose. "You said you're applying to UA? What's your quirk?" "Young Midoriya," Izuku held out his hand, palm up. "New order. I can impose rules on reality within certain limitations." He demonstrated by creating a small flame that danced above his palm without burning him. The flame exists but doesn't consume oxygen or produce heat. All Might's sunken eyes widened. "That's remarkable. It reminds me of..." He trailed off, a distant memory seeming to surface. "Sir," All Might shook his head. "Nothing. It's just I once knew a hero with a similar ability. An American. She could impose rules on anything she touched." He looked at Izuku with renewed interest. "Any relation to Americans in your family?" Izuku blinked in surprise. "My father works overseas. His mother was American, I think." A thoughtful expression crossed All Might's gaunt face. "Interesting. Young Midoriya, would you mind showing me more of what you can do with this quirk of yours?" And that was how Izuku found himself spending the next hour demonstrating new order in an abandoned section of the beach, under the watchful eye of the deflated symbol of peace. He showed how he could make water walk up walls, temporarily change the properties of materials, create barriers from thin air, and even briefly alter gravity in a small area. With each demonstration, All Might's expression grew more intrigued. "Your control is impressive for someone so young," All Might finally said. "Most quirks this complex take decades to master." Izuku shrugged, though pride warmed his chest. "I've been training since I was 7. I know my quirk could be powerful, but power without control is just destruction waiting to happen." All Might nodded, a strange light entering his eyes. "Young Midoriya, what would you say if I told you I believe you could become more than just a great hero, that you could become the greatest?" Izuku met All Might's gaze steadily. "I'd say that's been my plan all along, sir." All Might laughed, a sound that started as a wheeze and grew into something genuine. "I like your spirit, kid. Tell me, have you ever heard of the quirk One for All?" By the time Izuku returned home that evening, the trajectory of his life had shifted dramatically. All Might, Toshinori Yagi, had offered him a legacy beyond anything he could have imagined. One for All, a quirk passed from generation to generation, growing stronger with each transfer. A quirk that, combined with new order, could create something unprecedented. "You already have an incredible quirk," All Might had explained. "But One for All isn't just about power, it's about legacy, about carrying the torch of peace. And I believe you're the right vessel for both." Izuku sat on his bed, staring at his hands. New order had defined him for most of his life. Adding One for All wouldn't just increase his power, it would fundamentally change who he was as a hero. "Am I ready for this?" he wondered. "Can I really carry two such powerful quirks?" The answer came not as doubt, but as determination. He reached for his notebook and began to write, mapping out training regimens, possible quirk interactions, and strategies for the months ahead. All Might had given him a choice and 10 months to decide. But in his heart, Izuku already knew his answer. He would take One for All, master it alongside New Order, and forge a new path, one worthy of the symbol of peace's legacy. Chapter 3, Forging Steel. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park had once been beautiful. Now it was a dumping ground, a graveyard of abandoned appliances, furniture, and industrial waste that stretched as far as the eye could see. "Your task," All Might announced, gesturing to the panorama of trash, "is to clear this entire beach in 10 months. Izuku surveyed the seemingly impossible challenge, calculations already running through his mind. To build my body strong enough to handle one for all, he concluded. Precisely. All Might pointed dramatically at Izuku. One for all stockpiles power. If your body isn't strong enough to handle it, your limbs will explode when you try to use it. Rather than looking horrified, Izuku nodded thoughtfully. My new order allows me to affect objects, but it doesn't enhance my physical capabilities. If I'm going to combine these quirks effectively, I need a body that can withstand the strain. You catch on quick, young Midoriya. All Might's skeletal form somehow managed to look impressed. I've created a training plan I call the American Dream Plan. Follow it to the letter, and you'll be ready to inherit my power just before the entrance exam. Izuku accepted the thick packet, already flipping through the detailed regimen. This is comprehensive, he murmured, eyes scanning meal plans, workout schedules, and recovery protocols. I can make adjustments to optimize for my body type and metabolism, but the framework is solid. All Might blinked, momentarily taken aback by Izuku's analytical response. Most kids would be intimidated by such a rigorous plan, but Midoriya was already looking for ways to improve it. There's one more thing, All Might added. While you train your body, I want you to limit using new order for anything that would make this task easier. This isn't just about getting stronger. It's about earning one for all through honest effort. Izuku closed the packet, determination hardening his features. I understand. No shortcuts. That said, All Might continued. I do want you to continue developing new order separately. We should better understand how it might interact with one for all. Izuku nodded, already mentally carving his days into segments. Physical training, quirk development, academic preparation, and rest. I'll need to adjust my current schedule, but I can make it work. That's the spirit. All Might transformed briefly into his muscular form to give Izuku a thumbs up before deflating again with a cough. Now, let's start with that refrigerator over there. And so began the most grueling 10 months of Izuku Midoriya's life. Each morning started before dawn with protein-rich meals and beach cleanup. Refrigerators, microwaves, and old furniture became his training weights. At school, he maintained his top academic standing while analyzing hero footage during lunch breaks. Evenings were split between more beach work and focused new order training sessions. 3 months in, Izuku dragged a rusted truck chassis across the sand, muscles straining against the weight. Sweat poured down his face as he finally maneuvered it onto the growing pile of cleared debris. Excellent progress. All Might called from where he sat on a cleaner section of beach, making notes. Your form has improved significantly. Izuku caught his breath, wiping sweat from his brow. Thanks. I've been studying biomechanics to optimize my lifting technique. All Might shook his head with a chuckle. Most kids your age would be complaining about the workload, not researching ways to make it more efficient. Izuku took a long drink from his water bottle. Speaking of efficiency, I've been experimenting with new order applications that might complement one for all. He walked over to a heavy metal beam half buried in sand. Placing his hand on it, he focused. New order. For the next 5 minutes, this beam will weigh half its actual mass while maintaining structural integrity. The beam visibly shifted in the sand as its effective weight decreased. Izuku lifted it with noticeably less strain than an object of its size would typically require. I figure if I can temporarily alter the properties of objects I'm interacting with, it could extend the practical applications of one for all strength enhancement. All Might stroked his chin thoughtfully. Creative. But remember what I said about shortcuts. This isn't for the beach cleanup, Izuku clarified quickly. I'm thinking about rescue operations. Imagine being able to temporarily reduce the weight of collapsed building materials while maintaining their structural properties, or increasing the tensile strength of cables during high-wire rescues. All Might's expression shifted from concern to impressed understanding. You're thinking like a true hero, young Midoriya, not just about combat, but about saving lives. That's the whole point, isn't it? Izuku replied simply. By the 6-month mark, Izuku's transformation was becoming impossible to ignore. His once-average physique had developed into a chiseled frame of functional muscle. More importantly, his control over new order had reached new heights of precision. During one evening session, he demonstrated his progress by creating a complex series of air platforms above the beach, invisible stepping stones that he used to traverse 30 meters without touching the ground. The precision required to maintain multiple points of solidified air simultaneously used to give me migraines, he explained to All Might. Now I can hold it while performing other mental tasks. And the two-rule limitation? All Might inquired. Still in place, Izuku confirmed, jumping down from his final air platform. But I've gotten better at working within that constraint. For example, he touched a piece of driftwood and focused. New order. This wood will float 3 meters above the ground and change color based on proximity to living beings. The driftwood rose to hover at the specified height, its natural brown shifting to a vibrant blue as Izuku stood near it. When he stepped away, it faded to green, then yellow as the distance increased. The proximity color rule is actually functioning as a detection system, Izuku explained. One rule gives it practical utility, while the second adds informational value. All Might nodded appreciatively. You're not just getting stronger, young Midoriya. You're getting smarter about how you use your power. As the final month approached, Izuku's pace accelerated. What had once seemed an impossible task, clearing the entire beach, now appeared achievable. His body moved with efficient precision, his mind constantly refining approaches to each new challenge. One morning, All Might arrived to find Izuku already hard at work before sunrise, moving the last few major pieces of debris to the collection point. You're early today, All Might observed, checking his watch. Even by your standards, Izuku grunted as he positioned a washing machine on the growing pile. I wanted to finish before the entrance exam. Today's the day. All Might looked around in amazement. The beach was pristine, cleaner than it had been in years. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, casting golden light across the newly revealed sand. Young Midoriya, this is beyond what I expected. Izuku climbed to the top of the trash mountain he'd created, his silhouette framed by the rising sun, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. He nevertheless raised his fists toward the sky and let out a victorious shout that echoed across the water. All Might felt something tighten in his chest. Pride, yes, but also certainty. This was his successor. This was the future. Izuku Midoriya, he called, transforming into his muscular form. You have earned this power. Izuku turned, his face streaked with sweat and tears of exhaustion, but his eyes burning with determination. I'm ready, he said simply. All Might reached up and plucked a strand of his golden hair. One for all is passed from one willing heart to another. Eat this. Izuku blinked. Eat your hair. To inherit my power, you need to ingest my DNA. This is the least disgusting way I could think of. After a moment's hesitation, Izuku accepted the strand and swallowed it. Now what? It will take a few hours for your body to process and integrate one for all. When it does, All Might placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. You'll feel it. That evening, as Izuku was reviewing his notes for the upcoming entrance exam, he felt it. A surge of power unlike anything he'd experienced before. Energy coursed through his veins like liquid fire, every cell in his body suddenly humming with potential. He gasped, dropping his pencil as he stared at his hands. They looked the same, but they felt completely different, as if he could tear through steel with his bare fingers if he wanted to. One for all, he whispered, testing the name of his new power. Standing, he moved to the center of his room and focused on channeling the energy into his right arm. Red lines of power appeared beneath his skin as the energy responded to his will. It was too much, too fast, like trying to direct a fire hose with a drinking straw. Izuku quickly released the power, breathing hard. This requires a different approach than New Order, he realized. It's raw power versus precise control. He picked up his phone and texted All Might. It worked. I can feel it. Need to practice control before the exam. The reply came quickly. Remember, clench your buttocks and yell, smash, from the bottom of your heart. Izuku couldn't help but smile at the advice, even as he made a more technical note in his journal. One for all responds to emotional intensity as well as physical direction. Possible synergy with New Order's precision requirements? The UA entrance exam was in 3 days. Not much time to master a new quirk, especially one as powerful as One for All. But Izuku Midoriya was no stranger to challenges. He closed his notebook and stood in the center of his room once more, focusing on the dual energies now residing within him. New Order, familiar, controlled, precise. One for all, wild, powerful, untamed. Together, he murmured, we'll become something new. He extended his hand, focusing on a point in the air before him. New Order. The air in this space will compress into a solid sphere. An invisible ball of compressed air formed at his command. Then, carefully, he channeled a fraction of 1 for all into his fingertip, just enough to make it glow with power. "Controlled smash," he whispered, flicking the compressed air sphere. The invisible projectile shot across his room and punched a small, perfect hole through his All Might poster before embedding itself in the wall behind. Izuku stared in shock, then broke into a wide grin. That worked better than expected. He quickly wrote in his notebook, technique name, ordered smash compress air with new order, propel with minimal 1 for all. Precision ranged attack with minimal collateral damage. By the time he fell asleep that night, Izuku had filled 3 more pages with potential combination techniques. His dreams were filled with possibilities, not just for passing the entrance exam, but for becoming a hero unlike any the world had seen before. Chapter 4. The Entrance Exam. The morning of the UA entrance exam dawned clear and crisp. Izuku stood before the massive gates of Japan's most prestigious hero school, his heart steady despite the monumental challenge ahead. Around him, hundreds of other applicants milled about. Some confident, others nervous, all determined. "Move aside, Deku." The familiar gruff voice came from behind him. Izuku turned to see Katsuki Bakugo, his childhood friend turned rival, scowling at him with his perpetual look of disdain. "Morning, Kaken," Izuku replied evenly. "Ready for today? Don't talk to me like we're friends," Katsuki growled. "Just stay out of my way. I'm going to ace this exam and be the only one from our middle school to get into UA." Izuku met his glare without flinching. "We'll see. Good luck, though." Katsuki's scowl deepened at Izuku's calm confidence. So different from the timid boy he'd once bullied. Without another word, he shouldered past and stormed toward the entrance. Some things never change, Izuku thought, adjusting the strap of his bag. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, only to catch his foot on an uneven paving stone. Not the best first impression, he thought as he began to fall, then felt himself stop midair. For a disorienting moment, he thought he'd unconsciously used new order, but then he realized someone had touched his arm. "Sorry for using my quirk on you without asking," said a cheerful female voice. "But it'd be bad luck to fall right before the exam, right?" Izuku turned to see a round-faced girl with rosy cheeks and a kind smile. She released her quirk, allowing him to regain his footing. "Thanks," he said, offering a genuine smile. "That would have been an embarrassing start." "No problem," she replied. "I'm Achiko Uraraka. You're here for the hero course too, right?" "Izuku Midoriya. And yes, I am. I'm so nervous. What's your quirk, if you don't mind me asking?" Izuku hesitated briefly. He'd spent years documenting his abilities with New Order, but One for All was still new and secret. "It's called New Order," he explained. "I can impose rules on reality within certain limitations." "Wow, that sounds amazing." Achiko's eyes widened. "Mine's zero gravity. I can make things I touch weightless." "That's incredibly useful for rescue operations," Izuku replied, his analytical mind already seeing applications. "You could easily lift debris or evacuate civilians from collapsed buildings." Achiko blinked in surprise. "That's exactly what I was thinking. Most people just ask if I get motion sick." Before they could continue their conversation, a loud announcement called all examinees to the auditorium for orientation. "Guess we should head in," Izuku said. "Good luck, Uraraka. You too, Midoriya. Maybe we'll both pass and be classmates." Inside the darkened auditorium, the pro-hero present mic explained the practical portion of the entrance exam. Examinees would be released into mock urban battlegrounds to destroy villain robots of varying point values. The higher the difficulty, the more points awarded for defeating them. "So they're testing combat effectiveness," Izuku murmured, making notes. "But for a hero course, there has to be more to it." And finally, Present Mike continued, "There's a zero-pointer obstacle that will rampage when in close quarters. I recommend that you avoid it." "A zero-pointer?" Izuku frowned. Why include an obstacle worth no points? Unless his train of thought was interrupted by Katsuki, who'd been assigned to a different testing ground. "TCH. Just as well," the explosive boy muttered. "Now I don't have to worry about you getting in my way." Izuku ignored the jab, focusing instead on final preparations. As they filed out toward the changing areas, he mentally reviewed his strategy. With New Order and the limited control he'd gained over One for All, he had options, but execution would be key. Standing before the massive gates of training ground B in his workout clothes, Izuku closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. Around him, other examinees fidgeted nervously or made last-minute preparations with their equipment. Remember the feeling, he told himself, recalling All Might's advice. One for All flows through your whole body. Don't try to force it all into one place. And start. Present Mick's voice suddenly boomed from speakers overhead. While other examinees stood confused, Izuku immediately sprinted through the opening gates. Years of training had taught him that hesitation was the enemy of opportunity. The mock city was eerily quiet for the first few seconds as he ran deeper into the urban maze. Then came the mechanical whirring. The first robot, a one-pointer, rounded the corner ahead of him. Target acquired. Commencing attack. The robot intoned, charging forward. Izuku didn't break stride. As the distance closed, he touched the ground before him. New Order. The concrete in a 3-meter line will become frictionless. The robot hit the modified surface and immediately lost traction, its wheels spinning uselessly as it slid forward. Izuku sidestepped its path and placed his hand on its metal hull as it passed. New Order. This robot's outer shell will compress inward by 10 centimeters. The effect was immediate and devastating. The robot's exterior crumpled like a crushed soda can, the compression damaging its internal components beyond repair. It sparked and went silent. 1 point, Izuku tallied mentally, already scanning for his next target. 2 3-pointers appeared at the end of the street, their larger frames housing more weaponry. Izuku analyzed the situation in an instant. Too open for the same approach. Time to try something new. He ran straight toward them, channeling a small percentage of One for All into his legs. The power surged through him, nearly throwing off his balance with unexpected acceleration, but he adjusted quickly. As the robots fired their ranged weapons, Izuku leapt, higher than humanly possible, but controlled enough to land on the shoulder of the first 3-pointer. New Order. This robot's targeting system will identify the other 3-pointer as an enemy. The robot beneath him immediately swiveled and opened fire on its counterpart. The second robot, confused by the sudden betrayal, returned fire. Within seconds, both had reduced each other to smoking debris. 7 points total, Izuku calculated, jumping clear of the wreckage. For the next 5 minutes, Izuku moved methodically through the mock city, employing various combinations of New Order and carefully measured applications of One for All. He turned robots against each other, created environmental hazards that the robots couldn't navigate, and occasionally used direct force when efficiency demanded it. His point total climbed steadily. 15, 23, 31, 42. Throughout the battleground, he could hear explosions, ice formations, and various other quirks in action as his fellow examinees tackled their own opponents. The initial distribution of robots was thinning out, making each encounter more valuable. Rounding a corner, Izuku came face to face with a massive 2-pointer that had cornered a purple-haired examinee whose quirk seemed ineffective against machines. Without hesitation, Izuku channeled One for All into his arm, more than he'd used before, but still restrained. Red energy lines appeared beneath his skin as he cocked his fist back. Smash! His punch connected with the robot's side, the impact sending it flying into a building with enough force to embed it in the concrete wall. The machine sparked violently before shutting down. "You okay?" Izuku asked the purple-haired boy, shaking his hand to dispel the mild discomfort from using One for All. "Yeah," the boy replied, eyeing Izuku with surprise. "Thanks for the save." Izuku nodded and continued on. 44 points. Should be enough to pass, but better to secure more while I can. The ground suddenly trembled beneath his feet. A shadow fell across the street as something massive moved between buildings. The 0-pointer had arrived. It was colossal, a towering mechanical monstrosity that dwarfed the surrounding structures. As it rolled forward on massive treads, buildings crumbled in its wake. Examinees scattered in panic, fleeing from the pointless obstacle. Izuku was about to join them when he heard a cry of pain. Looking back, he spotted Achiko Uraraka trapped under debris, directly in the 0-pointer's path. Her leg was pinned, and despite her attempts to use her quirk, the awkward angle prevented her from freeing herself. In that moment, Izuku didn't think about points or passing. He thought only of the girl who had helped him earlier, who was now in danger. He sprinted toward her, against the flow of fleeing examinees. Midoriya, Achiko's eyes widened as she saw him running toward the danger rather than away from it. "I'll get you out," he called, reaching her side and quickly assessing the situation. The concrete slab pinning her was too awkwardly positioned for a simple lift. The zero-pointer loomed closer, its massive shadow now engulfing them. No time for subtlety, Izuku decided. He placed his hand on the concrete slab. New order. This concrete will crumble into sand. The debris instantly disintegrated, freeing Achiko's leg. Izuku helped her to her feet, but it was clear she couldn't run. Her ankle was injured. The zero-pointer was now almost upon them, its massive fist already descending toward their position. "Hold on to me," Izuku told Achiko, who wrapped her arms around his neck without question. "This is going to hurt," he thought grimly, channeling one for all throughout his entire body for the first time. Power surged through him like lightning, his skin glowing with red energy lines as he crouched. New order. The air beneath my feet will provide maximum upward propulsion when compressed. The air solidified beneath him, forming an invisible launching pad. Combined with one for all at nearly 100% capacity, the result was explosive. Izuku and Achiko shot skyward with such force that the air cracked around them. In seconds, they were level with the zero-pointer's head, having cleared nearly 50 meters of vertical distance in a single bound. "Full order smash," Izuku roared, cocking back his fist as one for all's energy concentrated in his arm. His punch connected with the zero-pointer's face, the impact creating a shockwave that rippled through the air. Metal crumpled and twisted as the massive robot's head caved inward from the force. Internal systems failed catastrophically, causing chain reactions of explosions down its massive frame. As the zero-pointer began to topple backward, Izuku realized their predicament. They were now falling from a lethal height, and the backlash from using so much of one for all had left his arm and legs feeling shattered. One more move, he thought through the haze of pain. "Uraraka," he managed. "Can you make us both weightless?" "On it," she replied, touching both herself and Izuku. Immediately, their downward momentum continued, but without the weight that would make impact fatal. As they floated downward, Izuku focused through the pain. New order. The air beneath us will form a cushioned landing zone. The air 20 meters below solidified into a springy, invisible safety net that caught them gently as they descended. Once they touched down on the actual ground, Achiko released her quirk, returning their normal weight. "Release," she gasped, looking pale and nauseated from overusing her ability. Izuku collapsed beside her, his right arm and both legs throbbing with pain. They weren't broken. His physical training had prepared his body better than he'd expected, but they were definitely strained to their limits. "That was amazing, Midoriya," Achiko exclaimed, despite her own discomfort. "You saved me." Izuku managed to smile through gritted teeth. "You helped me at the entrance. I'm just returning the favor." "Time's up," Present Mick's voice boomed across the training ground. As medical robots approached to treat the injured examinees, Izuku took stock of his performance. 44 villain points. Not bad, but some of the others probably scored higher. What he didn't know, what none of the examinees knew, was that villain points were only part of the equation. In the monitoring room, the UA faculty had watched his rescue of Uraraka with great interest. "Rescue points," a small animal-like figure had announced. "The other basic ability we're looking for. How could someone who aspires to be a hero pass by a person in danger? Call it lip service if you want, but that's what makes UA different from other schools." For his heroic rescue of Achiko Uraraka, Izuku Midoriya had earned 60 rescue points, more than any other examinee that day. 1 week later, when the holographic acceptance message from All Might revealed his total score of 104 points and first-place ranking, Izuku stared in stunned silence before breaking into a smile of pure determination. The path to becoming the greatest hero had officially begun. Chapter 5. Class 1A. The first day at UA High School dawned bright and clear. Izuku stood before the enormous door labeled 1A, momentarily awed by what it represented. Behind this door were the top 20 students who had passed the Hero Course entrance exam, his future classmates, rivals, and allies. In the week since receiving his acceptance, Izuku had thrown himself into preparation. His notebook was filled with strategies for combining new order with one for all, techniques refined through careful experimentation. The backlash from using too much of All Might's power during the entrance exam had taught him an important lesson about restraint. Start small, he reminded himself. 5% is manageable. Work up from there. Taking a deep breath, he slid the massive door open. Inside, the classroom buzzed with the energy of exceptional teenagers getting acquainted. Izuku immediately recognized some faces from the entrance exam. The serious boy with glasses who had called him out during orientation, the girl with the creation quirk, and the dual-haired boy whose right side was covered in ice during the practical. "Ah, it's you!" A familiar voice called out. Achiko Uraraka bounded over, her face bright with excitement. "I'm so glad you made it in. I wanted to thank you properly for saving me during the exam." Izuku smiled genuinely. "I'm glad you're here too, Uraraka. How's your ankle? All healed up?" She demonstrated with a little hop. Recovery girl fixed it right away. "Your arms and legs looked pretty bad though. Are you okay?" "Yeah, just pushed myself a bit too hard," Izuku admitted. "Still learning my limits. If you're here to socialize, then you should have gone somewhere else." The deadpan voice came from below, specifically from what appeared to be a yellow sleeping bag on the floor. As the class watched in confusion, a disheveled man with long black hair and bloodshot eyes emerged from the bag like a butterfly from a particularly unkempt chrysalis. "It took you lot 8 seconds to quiet down," the man said, standing and revealing his all-black attire. "Time is a precious resource. You're not being rational." "This must be our homeroom teacher," Izuku realized, immediately cataloging details. Capture weapon around his neck, utility belt, combat goggles pushed up on his forehead. Underground hero, most likely. "I'm Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher," the man confirmed, reaching into his sleeping bag to pull out blue gym uniforms. "Put these on and meet me at the PE grounds. You have 15 minutes. Without further explanation, he shuffled out of the classroom, leaving 20 bewildered students behind. "Was that really a teacher?" someone whispered. "He looks so tired," another commented. Izuku was already grabbing a uniform. "We should hurry. I don't think he's the type to give second chances." 14 minutes later, Class 1A stood assembled on the PE grounds in their blue tracksuits. Aizawa regarded them with the same unimpressed expression he'd worn in the classroom. "Today we're having a quirk assessment test," he announced without preamble. "A quirk assessment? But what about the entrance ceremony? The orientation?" Achiko asked hesitantly. Aizawa's expression didn't change. "If you want to be heroes, we don't have time for those formalities. UA is known for its freestyle educational approach. That applies to us teachers as well." He held up a smartphone displaying a fitness tracking app. "You've been doing these physical tests since middle school, but you've never been allowed to use your quirks. The country still insists on prohibiting quirks when calculating the averages of those records. It's not rational." He turned to Katsuki, who had been unusually quiet. "Bakugo, how far could you throw in middle school?" 67 meters, Katsuki replied. Aizawa tossed him a softball. "Try using your quirk this time. As long as you stay in the circle, anything goes." Katsuki stepped into the throwing circle, stretching his arm as a feral grin spread across his face. "I'll add a little heat to this pitch." He wound up and threw with an explosive release that sent the ball rocketing into the distance with a thunderous boom. "All of you need to know your maximum capabilities," Aizawa stated as they watched the ball disappear into the sky. He held up his phone, displaying Katsuki's result. 705.2 meters. The class erupted in excitement. 705 meters? Seriously, this looks fun. We can really use our quirks as much as we want. Aizawa's expression darkened. "Fun, you say? You have 3 years to become heroes. Do you think it's all going to be fun and games?" His tired eyes suddenly sharpened with intensity. "All right, whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential and will be expelled." A shocked silence fell over the class. "He's serious," Izuku realized, studying their teacher's expression. "This isn't just motivation. He'll actually expel someone today. We're free to do whatever we want about the circumstances of our students," Aizawa continued, pushing his hair back to reveal a chilling smile. "Welcome to the UA Hero Course." As murmurs of disbelief spread through the class, Izuku assessed his options. With new order, he could perform well in most physical tests. One for all would give him additional power if needed, though he'd have to be careful not to injure himself again. The first test was the 50-meter dash. Izuku watched as his classmates displayed their quirks. The frog-like girl hopping the entire distance, the boy with engines in his calves rocketing forward, Katsuki using explosions to propel himself. When his turn came, Izuku stepped up to the starting line alongside a boy with a large tail. As the starting gun sounded, he activated New Order with a touch to the ground. New Order. The path before me will have zero friction. Simultaneously, he channeled 5% of One for All throughout his body, feeling the now familiar energy crackling just beneath his skin. The combination was devastatingly effective. With frictionless ground beneath him and enhanced strength and speed from One for All, Izuku shot forward like a bullet, his momentum carrying him across the finish line in a blur of green. 3.89 seconds, the automated tracker announced. Izuku skidded to a controlled stop, releasing his quirk on the ground. He caught Aizawa studying him with narrowed eyes. That was maybe a bit too flashy, Izuku thought. I should vary my approach for the other tests. For the grip strength test, he used New Order to increase the density of his hand muscles while applying 5% of One for All, achieving a respectable 540 kilograms. The standing long jump was almost too easy. A simple application of New Order to create a launching pad effect, combined with the enhanced jumping power of One for All, sent him sailing well beyond the sandbox. For the repeated side steps, he created small rebounding surfaces on either side, allowing him to bounce back and forth at superhuman speed. By the time they reached the ball throw, Izuku had demonstrated consistent excellence without revealing the full extent of either quirk. He could feel Aizawa's analytical gaze following his every move, evaluating not just his performance but his decision-making. When his turn for the ball throw came, Izuku decided to showcase a different application of his abilities. He stepped into the circle, softball in hand, aware of his classmates' attention. I could just enhance the throw with One for All, but that's predictable. Let's try something different. New Order, he murmured, touching the ball. This softball will accelerate continuously for 30 seconds after being thrown, maintaining a straight trajectory. He wound up and threw with 5% of One for All enhancing his arm. A good throw by any standard, but not extraordinary. The ball left his hand at a respectable velocity. Then the New Order effect kicked in. Instead of beginning its parabolic descent, the ball continued to accelerate along a perfectly straight line, growing smaller and smaller until it was barely visible in the distance. Aizawa's device beeped. The display showed 1.3 kilometers. Whispers rippled through the class. Did he just double Bakugo's distance? What kind of quirk does he have? He's been using different techniques for each test. Katsuki was visibly fuming, small explosions popping in his palms. Deku, he growled. You've been hiding your true power all these years? Izuku met his gaze calmly. I never hid anything, Kaken. I just kept improving. Before Katsuki could respond, Aizawa intervened. Enough. Next test. The remaining tests, sit-ups, seated toe touch, and long-distance run, passed in a blur of quirk demonstrations. Throughout it all, Izuku maintained his strategic approach, using New Order and One for All in varied combinations to showcase versatility rather than raw power. Finally, all 8 tests were complete. The class gathered around Aizawa, tension thick in the air as they awaited the results and the promised expulsion for the lowest-scoring student. Aizawa tapped his device, projecting a holographic ranking onto the air before them. Izuku found his name at the top of the list, followed closely by Shoto Todoroki, Katsuki Bakugo, and Momo Yaoyorozu. At the bottom was Minoru Mineta, a short boy with purple ball-like hair who had performed adequately but without the standout results of his classmates. His face had gone pale with fear. By the way, Aizawa said, dismissing the hologram with a swipe, I was lying about the expulsion. The tension broke like a snapped rubber band. It was a rational deception to draw out your maximum performances, Aizawa explained with the same bored expression he'd worn all day. While most of the class expressed relief, Izuku noticed that the serious-looking girl, Yaoyorozu, didn't seem surprised at all. Of course it was a lie, she stated matter-of-factly. It would be illogical to expel someone on the first day. This was obviously a psychological test. Was it, though? Izuku wondered, studying Aizawa's face. Something told him their teacher would absolutely have expelled someone if they'd shown no potential. As they walked back toward the main building, Achiko fell into step beside him. That was amazing, Midoriya. Your quirk is so versatile. Thanks, he replied with a genuine smile. Your zero gravity performed really well too, especially in the ball throw. Infinity isn't quite 1.3 kilometers, but I'll take it, she laughed. So your quirk lets you change properties of things? Izuku nodded, deciding on a simplified explanation. I can impose rules on reality within limits. 2 rules at a time, and they have to be specific. That's incredible. No wonder you scored so high on the entrance exam. As they continued chatting, Izuku felt someone watching him. Glancing back, he caught Todoroki observing him with calculating heterochromatic eyes. The dual-haired boy quickly looked away when their gazes met. He's assessing me, Izuku realized, just like I'm assessing everyone else. By the end of the day, Izuku had filled several pages in his newest notebook with observations about his classmates' quirks, potential applications, and possible synergies for team exercises. This wasn't just about staying ahead. It was about understanding how to work effectively with others whose abilities complemented his own. As he packed up to leave, a heavy hand clapped on his shoulder. He turned to find All Might in his skinny form, waiting in an empty hallway. Young Midoriya, impressive showing today. I watched the assessment from the faculty office. All Might, Izuku greeted him, glancing around to ensure they were alone. I tried to use one for all conservatively, like we practiced. All Might nodded approvingly. 5% throughout your body, good control for someone who's only had the quirk for a week. But I noticed you relied more on New Order for most tests. It seemed more efficient, Izuku explained. 1 for all gives me raw power, but New Order gives me precision. For most of those tests, precision was more valuable. Smart thinking. All Might's sunken eyes gleamed with pride. But remember what we discussed about your cover story. That New Order is my only quirk, and its manifestation has evolved as I've grown, Izuku recited. Don't worry, I was careful. No one saw the same application twice. All Might chuckled. You really are something, young Midoriya. Just remember, this is only the beginning. UA will push you far beyond what you experienced today. Izuku nodded, determination hardening his features. I'm counting on it. As he left campus that evening, Izuku reflected on the day's events. He had established himself as a top performer, begun forming connections with classmates, and demonstrated enough of his abilities to be taken seriously without revealing all his cards. Most importantly, he'd taken the first real step toward his goal of becoming the greatest hero, following in All Might's footsteps while forging his own unique path. New Order and 1 for all, he thought, looking down at his hands. Precision and power. With both of these quirks, there's no limit to what I can achieve. The sun was setting over Mizutofu as Izuku Midoriya headed home, his mind already racing with possibilities for tomorrow's challenges. Chapter 6. Battle Trial. I am here. Coming through the door like a normal person, All Might's dramatic entrance into classroom 1A, bursting through the doorway with his cape billowing behind him, was met with cheers and excited murmurs. After a morning of regular academic classes, the students were eager for their first official hero training. Welcome to the most important class at UA High, All Might announced, striking a heroic pose. Think of it as Hero NG 101. Today, we'll be pulling no punches. He held up a card with battle written on it in bold letters. Combat training, Katsuki exclaimed, a predatory grin spreading across his face. And to go with your first battle. All Might pointed dramatically to the wall, where numbered panels slid open to reveal shelving units. We've prepared the gear you requested to match your quirks. The class erupted in excitement as they realized what this meant. Their hero costumes, designed to their specifications and crafted by UA's support department, were ready. Get changed and meet me at Training Ground Beta, All Might instructed. The garb you bring into battle is vitally important, ladies and gentlemen. Now look sharp. 15 minutes later, the students of Class 1A assembled at the mock cityscape of Training Ground Beta, each wearing their personalized hero costume for the first time. Izuku's design was thoughtful and practical. A dark green jumpsuit with reinforced padding at key impact points, white gloves with special grip enhancers, arm and leg guards for protection during high-speed movement, and a utility belt with specialized compartments. The most distinctive feature was his mask, a respirator design with a visor that could display environmental data. Looking good, Midoriya, Achiko called, approaching in her own space-themed costume. Your costume is so cool and professional. Thanks, Izuku replied with a smile. Yours suits your quirk perfectly. The reduced weight must help with mobility. As they chatted, Izuku discreetly observed his classmates' costumes, analyzing how each design complemented their respective quirks. Katsuki's grenade-like gauntlets would store his explosive sweat. Todoroki's half-ice, half-fire costume reflected the dual nature of his quirk. Ida's armor was streamlined for speed. Each costume reveals something about their fighting style and personality, Izuku noted mentally. All Might, resplendent in his Silver Age costume, raised his arms for attention. Now that you're ready, it's time for combat training, sir. Ida's hand shot up immediately. This appears to be the same field used in the entrance exam. Will we be conducting urban battles again? Not quite, All Might replied. We'll be moving 2 steps ahead. Most villain fights you see on the news take place outside. However, statistically, the most heinous villains are more likely to appear indoors. Think about it. Backroom deals, home invasions, secret underground lairs. This exercise will split you into heroes and villains fighting in indoor battles. He explained the scenario. Villain teams would guard a mock nuclear weapon inside a building, while hero teams would attempt to secure either the weapon or the villains within a time limit. Teams and matchups will be determined by drawing lots. All Might announced, producing a box. Random team assignments, Izuku thought. That makes sense. In real hero work, we won't always get to choose our partners. When the drawing was complete, Izuku found himself paired with Achiko Uraraka on Team A. Their opponents would be Team D, Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida. Katsuki's eyes locked onto Izuku immediately, his expression darkening with competitive fury. Izuku met his gaze steadily, already mapping out strategies in his mind. Team A will be heroes first, Team D will play the villains, All Might declared. Everyone else will watch from the monitoring room. Villains, you have 5 minutes to set up before the heroes are allowed entry. As Katsuki and Ida headed into the designated building, All Might pulled Izuku aside. Young Midoriya, a word. I know you and young Bakugo have a history. Don't let personal feelings cloud your judgment in there. Izuku nodded solemnly. I understand, sir. I'll stay focused on the mission. All Might studied him for a moment, then clapped him on the shoulder. Also, regarding your full arsenal, use good judgment. The message was clear. Be careful with one for all in such a public setting. Outside the building, Izuku and Achiko studied the floor plans they'd been provided. 5 floors of corridors, rooms, and potential ambush points. The mock weapon could be anywhere inside. Bakugo will come for me directly, Izuku stated matter-of-factly. It's not just strategy, it's personal for him. You two know each other well? Achiko asked. We grew up together. He's always been exceptional, powerful quirk, natural talent, unwavering confidence. When my quirk manifested late, it complicated things between us. Achiko frowned. That doesn't sound like a great friendship. Izuku shrugged. It's complicated, but it means I know how he thinks and he knows some of my capabilities. That knowledge cuts both ways. He tapped the building plans. Here's what I'm thinking. Ida will stay with the weapon. He's too disciplined to abandon his post. Bakugo will hunt for us, probably alone. If we can avoid or neutralize him, we can focus on finding the weapon. What about your quirk? Can you use it to locate the weapon? Izuku considered this. Not directly, but I have some ideas. The key is to move carefully and stay in communication. Hero team, you may enter. All Might's voice boomed through their earpieces. Izuku and Achiko entered through a ground floor window, moving silently down the darkened corridor. Stay close, Izuku whispered. Bakugo is likely to. An explosion ripped through the hallway ahead as Katsuki burst from around the corner, propelled by his quirk. Found you, Deku, he roared. Right arm already cocked back for his signature right swing. Still leading with the right, Izuku thought, ducking under the telegraphed attack. He'd spent years analyzing Katsuki's fighting style, a fact the explosive boy seemed to have forgotten in his eagerness. Uraraka, go on ahead, Izuku called, shifting into a defensive stance. Find the weapon. I'll handle Bakugo. Achiko nodded and darted down an adjacent hallway as Katsuki recovered from his missed attack. Always hiding behind others. Deku? Katsuki snarled. Fight me with everything you've got. This isn't about us, Kaken, Izuku replied calmly. This is a team exercise with clear objectives. Don't give me that crap. Katsuki launched forward again, this time with a feint before spinning into an explosion-boosted kick. Izuku sidestepped, touching the wall beside him. New order. This wall section will become rubber-like for 10 seconds. The wall immediately gained elasticity. When Katsuki's kick connected, it absorbed the impact and rebounded, catapulting him back down the hallway. "You've been looking down on me all these years," Katsuki growled as he regained his footing. "Acting like you're better than me. I'll show you who's really the best." He raised his right gauntlet, a sinister grin spreading across his face. "These gauntlets store my sweat, the nitroglycerin-like substance that makes my explosions." When released all at once, Izuku's eyes widened as he realized what was coming. He's going to use a maximum output explosion in a confined space. "Young Bakugo, stop." All Might's voice crackled through their earpieces. "You'll kill him. He won't die if he dodges," Katsuki retorted, pulling the grenade pin. In the split second before the explosion, Izuku made his decision. Channeling 8% of one for all throughout his body, the most he could safely manage, he touched the floor beneath him. New order. The floor in a 3-meter radius will become a trampoline. The explosion roared through the corridor like a small bomb, the concussive force and heat tearing through the space. But Izuku was already moving, the trampoline effect launching him toward the ceiling where he touched another spot. New order. This ceiling section will become permeable to me for 5 seconds. He passed through the solid ceiling as if it were water, the explosion's force dissipating beneath him. Landing on the second floor, Izuku quickly assessed his options. That was close. Kaken's not holding back at all. His earpiece crackled. "Midoriya," Achiko's voice came through urgently. "I found the weapon. 4th floor, northeast corner room. Ida's guarding it, but he hasn't spotted me yet." "Good work," Izuku replied quietly. "Stay hidden. I'm on the 2nd floor now." Bakugo used a massive explosion, but I managed to escape upward. "Are you okay?" "Fine. I'm gonna try to make my way to you, but Bakugo will be hunting me. If you see an opportunity to secure the weapon, take it." Izuku moved cautiously through the 2nd floor, listening for Katsuki's approach. It wouldn't take his childhood friend long to figure out where he'd gone. "I need a strategy that lets me neutralize Kaken without causing major structural damage or seriously injuring him," Izuku thought. Something unexpected, a plan formed in his mind. Risky, but potentially effective. Sure enough, the stairwell door burst open moments later, and Katsuki stormed onto the 2nd floor, smaller explosions popping in his palms as he searched. "Come out and fight me properly, Deku," he shouted. "Or are you still just running away?" Izuku stepped out from behind a pillar, facing Katsuki directly. "I'm right here, Kaken." Katsuki's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Finally showing some backbone?" "This isn't about proving anything," Izuku said evenly. "It's about winning the exercise. But if fighting you is what it takes, then let's fight." A predatory grin spread across Katsuki's face as he launched forward. "Now you're talking." As Katsuki closed in, Izuku stood his ground, waiting until the last possible moment before touching his own costume. New order. My costume will become completely frictionless for the next 30 seconds. Katsuki's grabbing hand slid off Izuku's now impossibly slick costume, his momentum carrying him forward as his grip failed. Off balance and surprised, he was unprepared when Izuku, channeling one for all through his legs, executed a perfect sweeping kick that took Katsuki's feet out from under him. As Katsuki fell, Izuku touched the floor. New order. This floor section will become adhesive to anything that touches it. Katsuki crashed onto the now sticky floor, immediately finding himself stuck fast, like a fly on flypaper. His back, arms, and legs were firmly adhered to the surface. "What the hell?" he roared, trying to generate explosions to free himself. But with his palms stuck to the floor, his quirk only succeeded in scorching the surface without generating enough force to break free. Izuku quickly retrieved the capture tape from his belt and wrapped it around Katsuki's wrist, signifying his capture. "Bakugo has been captured by the hero team," All Might's voice announced through their earpieces. Katsuki's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "This isn't over, Deku. Fight me for real." "It is over, Kaken," Izuku replied, releasing the adhesive rule so that Katsuki could stand, though he remained captured according to the exercise rules. "And I did fight for real. I used my quirk strategically to neutralize yours." Leaving a fuming Katsuki behind, Izuku headed for the stairwell. "Uraraka, Bakugo is captured. I'm heading to your position now." "What's your status?" "Ida's patrolling around the weapon," she whispered. "He knows I'm somewhere nearby, but he hasn't spotted me yet. I'm hiding behind some crates on the eastern side of the room." "Perfect. I'll approach from the west. When you hear me enter, use your quirk on yourself and make a dash for the weapon from your side." "Roger that." Izuku moved swiftly but quietly up to the 4th floor. Peeking through the door to the target room, he spotted Ida, now calling himself Evil Ida, in a comically deep voice, guarding the papier-mâché missile with exaggerated villain movements. He's really getting into the role, Izuku thought with amusement. Taking a deep breath, Izuku touched the doorframe. "New order. This door will make no sound when opened." He slipped into the room silently, immediately drawing Ida's attention. "Ah, the hero arrives," Ida declared in his villain voice. "But you're too late. Your partner is nowhere to be found. And I, the evil villain, have cleared the area around the weapon, so there's nothing to hide behind." It was true, Ida had moved all the objects away from the weapon, creating a clear zone that would be difficult to cross without being intercepted. "That's some good thinking, Ida," Izuku acknowledged, slowly advancing. "But you've made one miscalculation." "Oh? And what's that?" "You focused too much on the ground approach." On cue, Achiko activated her quirk on herself, becoming weightless and launching into a floating sprint from her hiding spot. With the reduced gravity, she sailed over the cleared area, directly toward the weapon. Ida gasped and activated his engines, racing to intercept her. But Izuku was prepared for this. New order. The air in Ida's path will become dense as molasses. The air before Ida suddenly thickened, dramatically slowing his movement as if he were running through deep water. His engines roared with effort but couldn't generate enough thrust to overcome the resistance. "What is this?" Ida exclaimed, struggling forward. The delay was all Achiko needed. She reached the weapon and wrapped her arms around it triumphantly. "Retrieved. The hero team wins." All Might's voice boomed through the building. Back in the monitoring room, the rest of Class 1A had watched the battle with rapt attention. "Midoriya's quirk is incredible," Kirishima commented. "He completely neutralized Bakugo without throwing a single punch, and the way he coordinated with Uraraka at the end," Mina added. "Perfect teamwork." All Might assembled the 4 participants for a review once they returned from the building. Katsuki was uncharacteristically silent, his face a mask of suppressed fury and confusion. "Well, despite the excessive force from young Bakugo early on, All Might began. This was an excellent demonstration of both powers and tactics. Who would like to name the MVP of this match?" Yaoyorozu raised her hand. "If I may, I believe Midoriya deserves that title. He demonstrated superior situational awareness, quirk application, and teamwork. He neutralized the more aggressive opponent without causing unnecessary damage, communicated effectively with his partner, and developed a winning strategy that played to both their strengths." All Might nodded. "Well analyzed. Young Midoriya indeed showed exceptional judgment today." Izuku accepted the praise with a humble nod, though his attention was on Katsuki, who refused to meet his gaze. After class, as the students headed back to change, Izuku found his path blocked by Katsuki in an empty hallway. "This doesn't change anything?" Katsuki growled, hands jammed in his pockets. "You got lucky today. Next time, I'll crush you." Izuku met his gaze steadily. "It wasn't luck, Kaken. I studied your fighting style for years. I knew exactly what you would do." "You think you're better than me now? Because of that fancy quirk of yours?" "No," Izuku replied honestly. "I think we're on different paths. Always have been. I'm not trying to surpass you specifically. I'm aiming for something beyond both of us." Katsuki's eyes narrowed. "Don't give me that philosophical crap. Just know that I'm watching you, Deku. Something's different about you lately, more than just your fighting style, and I'm going to figure out what it is." As Katsuki stormed away, Izuku felt a chill of concern. Katsuki had always been perceptive beneath his brash exterior. If anyone might notice the addition of One for All to his arsenal, it would be him. "I'll need to be more careful," Izuku thought. "One for All is still new to me, still not fully integrated with my fighting style. The more I use it, the more obvious it might become that I have 2 distinct power sets." Later, as he walked home, Izuku reflected on the day's events. The battle trial had been his first real combat application of both quirks together, and the results had been promising. But he knew this was just the beginning. New Order gives me versatility and tactical options, he thought. One for All gives me raw power and speed. Together, they make me adaptable to almost any situation. But mastering them both, truly integrating them into a seamless fighting style, that's the real challenge ahead. The setting sun cast long shadows across Mizudafu as Izuku Midoriya continued forward, each step bringing him closer to the hero he was destined to become. Chapter 7, USJ Invasion. The bus ride to the unforeseen simulation joint was filled with the excited chatter of Class 1A. Today marked their first rescue training exercise, an opportunity to practice hero work beyond combat. I wonder what kinds of disaster scenarios they'll have us tackle, Izuku mused, seated beside Ida. Whatever they are, I'm certain they'll be appropriately challenging, Ida replied with his characteristic intensity. Yue never does anything halfway. Aizawa stood at the front of the bus, his perpetually tired expression unchanged. We'll be meeting the Space Hero 13 at the facility. Pay attention to their expertise. Rescue work requires different skills than villain combat. Izuku nodded thoughtfully. He'd spent the previous evening researching various rescue techniques and considering how New Order could be applied in disaster scenarios. The possibilities were extensive, creating safe passages through debris, reinforcing unstable structures, purifying contaminated air or water. One for All adds physical capabilities, but New Order could be the more valuable quirk for rescue operations, he reflected. When they arrived at the USJ, an enormous dome facility on UA's campus, the class filed out in orderly excitement. Inside, they were greeted by the Space Hero 13, whose puffy spacesuit concealed any identifying features. Welcome to the unforeseen simulation joint, 13 announced with a friendly wave. I designed this facility to prepare you for every disaster scenario imaginable. Floods, landslides, fires, shipwrecks. Each zone replicates a different rescue environment. The interior was massive, a central plaza surrounded by distinct zones, each mimicking a different disaster site. Izuku immediately began analyzing the visible areas, mentally cataloging potential applications for his quirks in each environment. Before we begin, 13 continued, raising a gloved hand, I have 1 point, or 2, or 3, or 4. As 13 launched into a speech about quirk control and the fine line between helping and hurting, Izuku noticed Aizawa glancing around with growing concern. Where's All Might? Aizawa asked 13 quietly. He was supposed to meet us here. About that, 13 replied in a lowered voice, holding up 3 fingers discreetly, a signal that Izuku recognized from his training with All Might. He's used up his hero form for 3 hours today already. Aizawa sighed, the height of irresponsibility. Let's get started without him. His words cut off abruptly as the lights throughout the facility flickered and died. At the central fountain, a small dark vortex appeared, swirling outward into a massive black portal. Stay together and don't move, Aizawa barked, instantly alert. 13. Protect the students. From the swirling darkness, figures began to emerge, dozens of them, with varying appearances and clear malevolent intent. What's that? Kirishima asked, squinting at the plaza below. More robots like in the entrance exam? Don't move, Aizawa commanded again, pulling his yellow goggles over his eyes. Those are villains. A collective gasp went through the class as the implications sank in. This wasn't a drill or an exercise. It was a real villain incursion on UA grounds. Izuku's analytical mind kicked into high gear, assessing the situation even as adrenaline surged through his system. The blackout, the precise timing during All Might's absence, the coordinated appearance. This is a planned attack. A towering figure with exposed brain matter and a beaked face emerged last from the portal, followed by a man covered in disembodied hands. The latter stepped forward, scratching his neck compulsively. Where is he? The hand-covered villain demanded, his voice carrying across the open space. We went through all this trouble, and All Might isn't even here? Maybe he'll show up if we kill some kids. Aizawa pulled up his capture scarf. 13. Evacuate the students and try contacting the school. The alarm sensors aren't working, and our communications are jammed. This was a calculated attack, but you can't fight them all yourself, Midoriya protested, quickly counting at least 70 villains below. Your fighting style is erasure and capture. It works best in stealth and one-on-one battles. Aizawa glanced back, a grim smile visible beneath his goggles. No good hero is a one-trick pony, Midoriya. 13. Take care of them. With that, he leapt down the stairs toward the horde of villains, his capture weapon already whipping through the air. This way, students, 13 called, directing them toward the entrance. Stay together. But before they could reach the exit, a swirl of dark mist materialized before them, coalescing into a shadowy figure with glowing yellow eyes. Greetings, the misty villain intoned. We are the League of Villains. Forgive our audacity, but today we've come to end the life of the symbol of peace, All Might. Was he not scheduled to be here? No matter. My role remains unchanged. Izuku analyzed the threat instantly. Warp Quirk. Extremely dangerous. He could separate us, trap us, or worse. Before 13 could activate their quirk, Bakugo and Kirishima launched forward impulsively, attacking the mist villain with an explosion and hardened fist, respectively. Did you think we were just gonna stand around? Bakugo growled. The smoke cleared to reveal the villain completely unharmed, his misty body reforming. You may be students, but you are still excellent golden eggs. It would be safer to scatter you all and torture you to death. His body expanded explosively, dark mist engulfing most of the class before 13 could counteract it. Izuku felt the ground vanish beneath his feet as the warp swallowed him, along with several classmates. He's separating us to pick us off individually, Izuku realized as he fell through darkness. I need to be ready to fight the moment I land. The darkness gave way to light and heat as Izuku found himself plummeting toward what appeared to be a city on fire, the conflagration zone. Below him, several villains were already looking up, having anticipated his arrival. No time to panic, Izuku thought, activating 5% of one for all throughout his body while simultaneously touching his costume. New order. My costume will be completely fireproof for the next hour. As he fell, he surveyed his surroundings with practiced precision. 4 villains visible, all with combat-oriented quirks based on their appearances. No sign of his classmates, though he thought he'd glimpsed Ojiro falling nearby. New order. The air beneath me will form a cushioned landing pad. The air solidified beneath him, allowing him to land safely in a crouch. The villains were already moving to surround him. Look what we caught! One villain with metallic skin called out. A little UA student all alone. This one's mine. Another with flame-covered arms declared, stepping forward. Let's see how you handle the heat, kid. The villain thrust both hands forward, sending a massive wave of fire rushing toward Izuku. Rather than dodging, Izuku stood his ground and touched the incoming flames. New order. These flames will reverse direction. The fire immediately curved in midair, doubling back toward its creator with increased intensity. The villain barely had time to look surprised before his own attack engulfed him, sending him crashing through a nearby storefront. One down, Izuku thought, already focusing on the remaining 3. The metallic villain charged, fists raised. You little punk! Izuku channeled one for all into his legs and easily sidestepped the attack, using the villain's momentum against him. As the villain stumbled past, Izuku touched his metallic back. New order. Your metal body will become as heavy as lead for 30 seconds. The villain immediately crashed to the ground, his body suddenly weighing over 10 times its normal amount. He struggled uselessly, unable to lift himself from the pavement. The remaining 2 villains, one with elongated claws and another with what appeared to be sonic abilities, hesitated, suddenly reassessing the threat level of the student before them. What kind of quirk is that? The claw villain muttered. He's changing the properties of everything he touches. It doesn't matter, the sonic villain replied, stepping forward. We just need to attack from a distance. He opened his mouth and released a devastating sonic scream that shattered nearby windows and sent debris flying. Izuku raised his hand toward the sound waves. New order. These sound waves will compress into a sphere. The devastating noise suddenly collapsed into a small, vibrating orb of concentrated sound that hovered before Izuku's palm. With his other hand, he channeled 8% of one for all. Return to sender, he said calmly, flicking the compressed sound sphere back at the villain with enhanced strength. The sphere exploded on impact, releasing all the contained sonic energy directly at its creator. The villain was thrown backward, crashing through several burning obstacles before lying still. The claw villain backed away, fear evident in his eyes. What the hell are you? A hero in training, Izuku replied simply, advancing with purpose. Surrender now. Instead, the villain turned to flee. Izuku touched the ground before him. New order. The ground in a 5-meter path will become frictionless. The villain hit the slick surface and immediately lost his footing, tumbling forward uncontrollably. Before he could recover, Izuku was upon him, restraining him with capture tape from his utility belt. With all 4 villains neutralized, Izuku paused to assess the situation. The fire was spreading throughout the zone, and he could hear distant sounds of combat. His classmates were fighting their own battles elsewhere. I need to regroup and find a way back to the central plaza, he decided. Aizawa-sensei was facing too many opponents alone, and the leaders of this attack are clearly dangerous. As he navigated through the burning buildings, Izuku encountered Ojiro, who was efficiently dispatching 2 villains with his powerful tail. Midoriya, Ojiro called out in relief. Glad to see you're okay. Likewise, Izuku replied, joining him. We need to get back to the central plaza. Our teachers are outnumbered, and I'm concerned about that villain with the exposed brain. He looks like the heavy hitter of their group. Ojiro nodded grimly. I've taken down 4 villains already. These aren't just street thugs. They came prepared to fight pro-heroes, which means they have a plan to deal with All Might, Izuku concluded. We need to warn the others. Together, they fought their way to the edge of the conflagration zone, encountering and defeating several more villains in the process. Izuku was careful to use New Order creatively while keeping his use of One for All subtle enough to be mistaken for enhanced strength from his primary quirk. As they approached the central plaza, a horrifying sight greeted them. Aizawa was on the ground, bloodied and broken, with the brain-exposed villains standing over him. The hand-covered leader was nearby, watching with disturbing fascination. That's their weapon, Izuku whispered, pulling Ojiro behind cover. The one they brought to kill All Might. What do we do? Ojiro asked, eyes wide at the devastation their teacher had suffered. We can't fight that thing. Izuku's mind raced through scenarios, analyzing and discarding options at lightning speed. Direct confrontation would be suicide. We need to rescue Aizawa and retreat. But how? He spotted movement in the water nearby, Azui and Mineta emerging cautiously from the flood zone. They too were assessing the situation, looking for an opening to help their teacher. An idea formed in Izuku's mind. Ojiro, can you make it to Azui and Mineta without being seen? We need coordination for this to work. I think so. What's the plan? We're going to create a diversion, grab Aizawa-sensei, and retreat to a defensible position until help arrives. As Ojiro carefully made his way around the perimeter, Izuku prepared himself. This would require precise timing and coordination between his 2 quirks. When Ojiro had reached the others and conveyed the plan, Izuku took a deep breath and channeled 15% of One for All throughout his body, pushing his current limit. The familiar red energy lines appeared beneath his skin as power surged through him. New order, he whispered, touching the ground. The earth in the central plaza will erupt in a controlled pattern away from Aizawa-sensei. The ground before him shuddered, then exploded upward in a series of coordinated eruptions that sprayed debris toward the villains while carefully avoiding their injured teacher. The hand-covered leader jumped back in surprise as his footing suddenly became unstable. What the? He snarled, scratching his neck frantically. Nomu, find whatever's causing this. The brain-exposed villain, Nomu, turned away from Aizawa, giving Azui the opening she needed. Her tongue shot out with incredible speed, wrapping around their teacher's midsection and pulling him toward the water's edge where Mineta waited. Izuku used the distraction to implement the second phase of his plan. He touched a large piece of debris near him. New order. This concrete will explode into blinding dust when it hits the ground. Using the enhanced strength of One for All, he hurled the concrete chunk high into the air above the central plaza. As it reached its apex, he dashed from cover, racing toward his retreating classmates. The concrete hit the ground and immediately exploded into a massive cloud of fine dust that filled the air, obscuring visibility throughout the plaza. Within this cover, Izuku rejoined his classmates, who were already moving Aizawa toward one of the side passages. That was amazing, Midoriya, Mineta whispered, wide-eyed. How did you do all that? No time to explain, Izuku replied, helping support Aizawa's weight. We need to move before. A massive crash interrupted him as Nomu burst through the dust cloud, moving with unnatural speed directly toward them. Its beaked face showed no expression, but its intent was clear. Run! Izuku commanded, pushing his classmates ahead while turning to face the monster. I can't beat this thing, but I might be able to slow it down, he thought, channeling One for All to its current maximum in his right arm. The pain was immediate, a warning that his body was reaching its limit, but he had no choice. As Nomu closed the distance with frightening speed, Izuku touched the ground one final time. New order. The ground between me and Nomu will become a bottomless pit. The concrete between them instantly vanished, creating a yawning chasm that dropped into darkness. Nomu, already in mid-stride, pitched forward into the void. That won't hold it for long, Izuku knew, turning to run after his classmates. But it might buy us enough time. The thought was cut short as a massive hand erupted from the pit, grabbing the edge. Nomu pulled itself up with terrifying strength, its red eyes fixed on Izuku. It's too fast, Izuku realized as the creature lunged, closing the distance in a heartbeat. In that moment of certain impact, the main doors of the USJ exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Have no fear, for I am here. All Might stood framed in the doorway, but not with his usual smile. His face was contorted with rage, his usual joviality replaced by cold fury. All Might, Izuku whispered in relief, collapsing to one knee as the strain of pushing One for All caught up with him. What followed was unlike anything Izuku had ever witnessed. All Might moved through the facility like a force of nature, dispatching common villains in the blink of an eye as he made his way to the central plaza. When he reached Nomu, the real battle began. The clash between the symbol of peace and the anti-symbol weapon shook the very foundations of the USJ. Blows that could level buildings were exchanged at speeds almost too fast to follow. Nomu's shock absorption quirk negated much of All Might's raw power, while its regeneration healed any damage that did get through. For a moment, it seemed even All Might might be outmatched, until he found his resolve and pushed beyond his limits. A hero always finds a way to go beyond. Plus Ultra, the final punch sent Nomu rocketing through the dome ceiling and into the stratosphere, effectively removing the League's strongest weapon from the battlefield. The hand-covered villain, whom All Might addressed as Shigaraki, raged at the defeat but was ultimately forced to retreat through Kurogiri's warp gate when UA reinforcements finally arrived. In the aftermath, as medical attention was provided to the injured and police secured the facility, Izuku found himself being examined by Recovery Girl. "You pushed yourself too hard again," she scolded, administering her healing kiss to his strained muscles. "One day you're going to do permanent damage, young man." "I had no choice," Izuku replied, wincing as his body knitted itself back together. "Our teacher was down, and that Nomu thing was too powerful for conventional tactics." Recovery Girl's expression softened slightly. "Your quick thinking saved lives today. Just be more careful with that body of yours, especially with the peculiar quirk combination you're developing." Izuku nodded, understanding her concern. Using One for All at higher percentages still strained his body, and combining it with the mental focus required for New Order created its own unique fatigue. Later, after giving his statement to the police, Izuku found All Might, now in his true form, waiting for him in an empty corridor. "Young Midoriya," All Might began, his sunken eyes serious. "I reviewed the security footage. Your actions today were both reckless and heroic. I know I shouldn't have engaged directly," Izuku admitted, "but Aizawa-sensei was." All Might raised a hand to stop him. "I'm not criticizing your decision to act. I'm acknowledging your growth. The way you coordinated your classmates, assessed the threat, and implemented a rescue plan under extreme pressure. That was the work of a true hero in training." He placed a bony hand on Izuku's shoulder. "But I'm concerned about how you're pushing One for All. I saw the strain it put on your body when you used it at higher percentages." Izuku nodded solemnly. "I'm still working on proper regulation. New Order comes naturally to me after years of practice, but One for All is different, more raw, more alive." "It will take time," All Might agreed, "but today showed me something important. The synergy between your quirks is even more powerful than I anticipated. When you created that chasm to slow Nomu, that was New Order enhanced by One for All's energy, wasn't it?" "Yes," Izuku confirmed. "I've noticed that channeling One for All while using New Order seems to amplify its effects and range. It's like the extra energy gives New Order more to work with." All Might's expression turned thoughtful. "We need to explore this connection further, in a controlled environment. If One for All truly amplifies New Order, the potential applications could be Well, beyond anything we've seen before. As they parted ways, Izuku reflected on the day's events. The USJ invasion had been terrifying, but also illuminating. He'd seen firsthand the kind of threats a pro-hero must face, and he'd discovered new dimensions to his own abilities under pressure. The League of Villains will be back, he thought as he headed home, his body exhausted but his mind racing with new insights. And next time, I'll be better prepared. In his notebook that evening, he added a new section titled Quirk Synergy, Beyond the Sum of Parts, where he began documenting the emerging relationship between New Order and One for All, a combination that he was beginning to realize might truly have no limits.
And so, Izuku Midoriya takes his first steps not as the powerless boy the world expected, but as a rising legend, armed with New Order and One for All. But true power comes with a price, and the path of a hero is never easy. What awaits him next? You'll have to find out in the next chapter of What If Deku Had New Order? ChronoCrew Legends. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and join me next time as the story continues.